Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in. My name is Yusuf Mutamba, and I'll be your moderator for this panel discussion that is dedicated to smart cities with a key focus on how we can leverage digital technologies to enhance urban efficiency in Africa. Joining me in this discussion is a panel of two speakers who have extensive knowledge and deep understanding of this topic. Without any further ado, allow me to introduce our speakers who will be joining us in this journey as we moderate and find ways we can build sustainable and more urban cities that talk to our problems. So with me on the panel, I have Elba Foster, who is a technical expert in smart cities with the UNDP Global Technology Center. And I'm also joined by Aisling Lennon, who is currently working as a regional coordinator from Smart Dublin in Ireland. Thank you for joining us. So before we jump into our conversation, I think it's well due and that I give our panelists some time to briefly tell us more what they do and what they always focus on in terms of smart cities. Thank you. I'll start with you, Elba.
Thank you, Yusuf, and also thank you for the invitation to participate today in this panel. So I'm Elba, I work for the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development. UNDP is the United Nations Development Program, which is present in more than 150 countries worldwide, providing support to local and national governments in implementing their policies. And as a global center, what we do is to provide support in specific topics to these country offices and the local governments, and more specifically in the domains of technology and innovation from the Global Center here in Singapore, and myself and my colleagues in smart cities and digitalization.
Well, I'll go to you, Aisling.
Sure. Also, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and participate in today's panel. My name is Aisling Lennon. I'm the regional coordinator for Smart Dublin. So Smart Dublin is the smart city program for Dublin in Ireland. Dublin is our capital city. It's home to about just over 1 million people. And that makes it a very big city in Ireland, but it certainly isn't a big city in an international perspective. So I work on behalf of the 4 Dublin local authorities, so the 4 local governments that administer the Dublin region. And the Smart Dublin team, I suppose our goal is to improve public services and enhance quality of life for the people who work and visit and live in Dublin using new technology and innovation. So we work with a whole host of different stakeholders within our cities. We work with our colleagues within the local government. We work with the technology providers. We work with academia. And of course, we work with our citizens to deliver our smart city program.
Thank you, Elba. Thank you, Ari. So the key focus of our conversation today is basically to explore modalities that are going to inform our approach on how best we can build more.
Yusuf.
We don't hear you, Yusuf. Sorry.
So can you hear me?
I hear.
Yes.
So yeah, so the key focus of our conversation today is basically to explore modalities that will inform our approach on how best we can build sustainable and more efficient urban cities in Africa. And I'll start the conversation right away with you, Elba. Many of us are trying to wrap our heads around this concept of smart cities. Could you briefly tell us what this is all about and what is the benefit of people living in smart cities?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the smart cities at the beginning of speaking about the smart cities, and this has continued a bit until now, people were thinking always about technology, and it was really in a moment where ICT was beginning to be in the agenda and was a really innovative way of using new technologies to providing services. But throughout the year, the concept of smart cities has evolved a little bit, and I think that now is much more related to innovation and sustainability. And these 2 concepts have become more important, like how cities are smart, providing services to their citizens and solving the problems that they have right now. So I think that the benefit for people that are living in smart cities, or what smart cities provide to people, is that the governments are constantly innovating and finding new solutions to challenges. So they are trying new policies, new technologies, new methods, new ways of finding solutions to problems that all cities have. And I think that it is really important to stress this element of innovation in our smart cities, because precisely when there are new problems such as COVID-19 has surprised us with a set of challenges that we didn't expect, what you need is really to be able to find solutions with what you have at hand and what is needed in your local context and what you have. So I think that this concept of innovation is really important. And also I think that something that is quite definitory of a smart cities are the partnerships that are generated across the actors that are in the city. So it's not just the government providing these solutions, but also cooperating with private sector, be it the startups or more bigger companies or corporates, and also citizens and the wider community. So we have seen analyzing different smart urban innovations that the most successful ones are the ones that are using these different bodies or experiences and knowledge, and they are really working with all this knowledge and in the capacity of implementing these solutions together. So I think that the smart cities nowadays is more related to innovation, innovative partnerships, and sustainability.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I totally agree with you. Strategic partnerships are very key in terms of building this. But when you get down to the African continent, there's a very big disconnect between government and the private sector in driving this concept into reality. And I would like to come to you, Aisling. From a public sector point of view, what has your experience been like in trying to engage the private sector in terms of driving the concept of smart cities into reality?
So I think the first thing that I would say is the disconnect between the public and private sector is not just an Africa problem. I think that, we see that in my own experience working in Ireland, my colleagues across Europe, even colleagues in America, that happens, I think, in multiple cities all over the world. In terms of Dublin, I suppose we're kind of a unique city in terms of our ecosystem, because we are home to the European headquarters of quite a lot of the world's biggest technology companies. So, Facebook, Google, Apple, LinkedIn, all of their European headquarters are in Ireland, most of them in Dublin. So we do have, I suppose, that expertise here in the city. But aside from that, we have a very, very engaged startup community. We also have excellent universities, and we have excellent research centres. So we have a whole host of innovators, I suppose, that call Dublin their home. And we've been really able to tap into that as part of Smart Dublin. And I suppose what Elba was saying about this whole idea of partnerships and relationship building, that's something I think that has really stood to our success in the Smart Dublin programme. When we began our program in 2016, we had to do a piece of work in order to get to where we are now with that ecosystem. So we had to think about things like innovative procurement approaches. We had to think about things like how do we develop strategic partnerships with large organizations, with small organizations? How do we bring people into the fold who might not necessarily be always part of this conversation? So we've had a very good relationship with the private sector. I suppose the one thing that I would say in terms of the disconnect is that there's probably a little bit of learning to be done between the public sector and the private sector in terms of the cultures of our organizations. Sometimes there's a little culture clash. I think in particular for the small businesses that work with us, often, I think they're surprised that the public sector, often we are big, we are old, we move slowly, we have many layers of bureaucracy and many layers of administration. And there's a lot of work that's happening at the moment around public sector reform, and we have to learn from the private sector to be more adaptive and to be more responsive. But the public sector is fundamentally different, I suppose, from the private sector. We're not going to move fast and break things. We can't do that because we're not administering money from shareholders or from investors. This is taxpayers' money that we work with. So there is sometimes, I think, a little culture clash between the private sector and the public sector.
Thank you for that. And maybe just to add a footnote to what you said, I believe for this relationship to come to reality, there needs to be a strong political will. And I'll come back to you, Elba, on this. I believe the UNDP Global Center of Technology has worked with a number of African countries. And what I would want to know, do you think there's enough political will on the continent to actually bring this concept of smart cities into reality?
Yes, I do think so. So we have seen, working with different African countries, we have seen that there's a lot of interest and it is growing to work specifically in the domain of smart cities and innovation and how to find innovative solutions or new solutions to challenges. So for instance, we have seen that there's a big focus on how to solve challenges very focused on cities in the domain of waste management in urban context, or how to integrate informal workers in, into the value chain and how to improve their working conditions, how to really cooperate with them. We have also seen a lot of interest in improving urban mobility. So not just in promoting more sustainable mobility alternatives, but also how to make it safer, how to identify the different hotspots in a city, how to pedestrianize, etc. Also, a lot of interest in how to provide better public services and improve the relations with some of the groups of citizens or communities, like traders or owners of small companies in the city, how they can register for stalls in markets, or how they can interact better and more easily with the local government, how to improve the resilience of cities, not just related to natural disasters, but also health challenges as the one that we have been living in this year. So I think that there's growing interest in working in the domain of cities and smart cities concretely. And also, I have seen, we have seen on the team, a lot of openness and interest in learning new ways of interacting with the community. So I completely agree with Aisling that this disconnect between public and private sector, it's not something just from Africa. I think that it happens in many things. And I also completely agree that there's also this cultural clash between these actors, and that it needs to be a learning process, and it's a journey. It's not just that things happen from one day to the other. So you really need to build these relationships. And we have been doing, for instance, an open innovation challenge across 5 different cities in Africa. And we have seen from the public officials a lot of interest on really learning how they can scope problems or problem statements where the citizens, startups, and local community can really provide solutions. And they have been really participating in looking for the best way to put these challenges in front of their community, how to better receive these proposals and engaging the community. So I think that there's an interest. And I would just add also that I see that in Africa, there's an enormous creative potential. And I think that policymakers are also beginning to realize of that. So the capacity of all the youth and all the startups and all the coders, all the makers, all this creativity and strength that is in the local communities is being more and more realized and more asked for to provide solutions. So I think that there is this change and there is this interest, or we have witnessed from several cities that's a path that they are willing to go to.
Okay. And that is quite interesting. And maybe I want to build onto this conversation. And back to you, Aisling. What has been the driving force behind Smart Dublin? How have you been able to drive this concept forward?
So I think that the driving force behind Smart Dublin probably has changed a little bit over the life cycle of the programme. So Smart Dublin was initiated back in 2016, and it was really coming from a very economic development, economic vibrancy background. We were just coming out of the recession in Ireland, and there was a big focus on one, job creation within the city, and two, trying to attract inward investment into the city. But we've been lucky that our economy has been doing quite well over the last few years. And I suppose the drivers have started to change a little bit. And just as Elva was saying, we've really started to apply very much, I suppose, a challenge-based approach to how it is that we work now. So we've done quite a lot of engagement within the local authorities with our colleagues in waste management or in libraries or in traffic management. We've done quite a lot of engagement with our citizens and public to see what are the challenges that they experience in their day-to-day lives around the city. And now I suppose that's the driver of the programme, the reality that we have these challenges that we can match with innovative technological solutions that can deliver sustainable impact, as opposed to, I suppose, what it originally was around maybe like branding and selling Dublin as somewhere that's open. And now I suppose we're at that maturity level where the programme is being really driven by the challenges and the projects.
Okay, and that is quite exciting and very encouraging. But right now, I want us to shift our focus towards Africa. And I'm going to share with you some facts that will shape the ground for our conversation. So according to the UN Habitat, up to 1.2 billion people will reside in the urban centers by 2030. What this implies is that there will be a dramatic change in the consumption of things like energy, food security, and so on. And my question to you, Elba, do you think leveraging technology solution in itself alone will help us redeem this situation?
I think that it is a really interesting question. I don't think that just technology will help to address all these challenges. So I think that technology is very relevant because it allows us to find solutions that we didn't have years ago, and it will continue to provide new solutions that can be really useful. But we do not need to forget that technology is only part of the solution. So there's also a really important part of behavior change. So also citizens need to understand what are these challenges, what they can do about that. Technology is not going to do all the choices for us. And you also need to think about the governments, how do they need to change in order to work together with these technologies and also to become more efficient and communicate better which are these challenges and how they can be addressed. So I think that technology definitely has a lot of potential to help us solve problems, but I think that it would be a mistake just to focus on technology. I think that the approach by challenges, like trying to understand what are the roots of the problem and then seeing how technology can help us, is really the way to go or the way to finding sustainable solutions. Also because you might find in some contexts that you cannot implement all the technologies that you might find in the market because there's a lack of infrastructure or there's a lack of local knowledge on how to operate them. And this will take some years to be ready to incorporate technologies. And it can be digital technologies, but also related to energy or water. So I think that it is important to always keep in mind that we need to work in parallel in the long term, in the short and medium terms, and look for solutions that are building a whole ecosystem of more sustainable cities in the future.
So, and I totally agree with you that we need to look beyond technology. And maybe just to engage Aisling on this same topic or same issue, I would want to understand, I'm very curious on how Smart Dublin has been able to approach this. Could you say that you've been able to look at solutions that are not exactly technology driven, but also kind of fit in with the goal of driving the concept of smart cities forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I suppose echo what Elba said, that at the beginning of our program, there was a lot of excitement about technology, and technology was going to save us all and fix all of our problems. And I think as the program and indeed just the Smart City agenda globally has matured, we've started to realize that there's some challenges that which require, for example, a green approach. That technology isn't always going to be the case. So in our city, we have some issues around flooding. Technology can help us in identifying flooding, but really the solution there is more green spaces around our rivers. Like for us, that's smart, but it might not be driven by technology because it is innovative and it is positive change in our city. So yes, I think that the technology, the idea that the technology is the exclusive driver of any of these changes, it's false. The technology is just one tool in our bag for delivering sustainable and resilient communities.
All right. Yeah, and that is quite interesting. So we need to have a holistic picture in terms of how we approach this concept. That is how I gather your remarks. And let's put this in the context of the ongoing crisis. I would want to know from both of you, and starting with Elba, what are some of the initiatives that you've undertaken to counteract the pandemic?
Yeah, so the pandemic, I think that it has been a really big challenge in all the countries because it has affected very different sectors, so health, but also food security, government continuity, etc. So as UNDP, we have been providing support through our country offices to governments all across the world in providing response to COVID-19 in all these different aspects. And in the strategy that we have shaped across around how we can provide the better solution or support the governments in providing these solutions, we have given a really important role to digitalization too, because in many countries, it has been key to really allow governments for maintaining their business continuity and providing services. We have used also, we have explored solutions in digitalization to facilitate small traders to participate in markets, enhancing some e-commerce initiative. This has allowed us also to ensure the distribution of food. Different solutions that have also helped us to better track the medical stocks or deliver cash more effectively. From the Global Center, some of the initiatives, we have been collaborating with some of these initiatives, but more specifically, what we have done is one digital toolkit, which is available in our website. It's a toolkit or a repository of open source tools that have been successfully applied in other contexts, and that governments can easily incorporate into their operations. So they are solutions that you do not need to pay a license for, and that can be developed by different software developers. So such as OpenELIS, for instance, that it is a laboratory information system that has been used for controlling the different inputs and outputs of laboratories, for instance, for tests, or other tools to generate easily chat box or other means of easily interacting with citizens, and that can be low cost or via SMS, etc. So we have developed this repository available to all the governments or people that are looking for open source solutions to provide this response to this challenge. We also promoted the Detect and Protect Challenge, which was a challenge that we launched with Hackster to the makers community, global community, to provide also open source solutions that can be replicated. So it was not digital solutions, it could be physical solutions, physical innovations or products that were presented to this challenge, and then now they are all available with how to develop them by yourself in different parts of the world. So we had an amazing response from makers all across the world. And I think that it really helped to demonstrate how important it is to collaborate and how interesting it is to exchange knowledge across countries, because we really got a very interesting repository of tools that anyone can access on how to, for instance, generate like hand clean stations for hand cleaning with your local materials, to some more complex things on how to measure temperature in patients or in walkings in the buildings, etc. So it was a really interesting experience, and we are now implementing with some makers in some countries in Africa these solutions and building them with local communities. And finally, we recently launched an initiative with Draper University. So it is an acceleration support program, and this first launch will be focused on health tech. So the idea is to provide solutions that are already a bit developed and that want to scale and become better and get more outreach with some guidance and support in order to make health tech like more available in different countries. So I think that those would be like the three major initiatives that we have been doing from the Global Center, but in general, we have been providing support to governments as in all the areas that they require us.
Okay, and maybe still at that, is there a success story that you can tie to some of these initiatives?
Yes, so for instance, on the digital toolkit, one of these open source solutions that I was mentioning, the OpenELIS, we put it in the repository, etc. Then it was seen by the government in Mauritius and our country office. So we supported them in identifying how we could implement that in their system, and they successfully implemented the solution for their laboratories. And actually, I do not recall exactly the figures, but I think that they had planned like several million for a system to precisely manage all this information from the laboratories, and actually the final cost of implementing this open source solution was around 700,000. So it was one of the success cases of using one of these tools that have been developed by the community and tested elsewhere, and that could be implemented in their concrete context.
Okay, and maybe I'll come to you, Aisling. What are some of the initiatives that you've undertaken in respect to driving the concept of smart cities vis-a-vis what is happening now in terms of the pandemic?
So I think it's important probably to just contextualize in Ireland, our city government is not responsible for health. So that sits with the national government. So for us, I suppose we're very much responsible for the well-being of our citizens and how they interact with the city environment. So for us, what we did, I suppose, was first and foremost, we needed information about how people were moving in the city, if people were obeying the lockdown rules. So we started to look at things like, what data do we already have, and can we pivot the use case for that data? One of the small innovations that I really liked was we have smart bins in our cities, which collect count data every time it's open. So we could use that as a proxy. We had a baseline from February, and now we can see that the bin was opened 200 times this day in February and once this day in February. So we're able to use those data sets in different ways to understand how people are moving around our city, to make sure that people were staying at home during the lockdown. Another big piece of our work, I suppose, this year within local government has been around providing transport options for people, because our public transport has been reduced to only 25% capacity. How are people going to travel in and out of the city safely? So there's been a huge amount of work across Dublin in each of the 4 local authorities around active travel. So taking over pieces of the roads to give way for bicycles, for pedestrians. And in Smart Dublin, we've supported some of the data collection around that so that we can really understand how these new interventions in the city are being used. One of the other, I suppose, really interesting things that has come out of this context for us has been around the whole planning permission process. So for our engineers and our architects, when they're designing buildings in our city, they have to go through a public consultation process where we would have a town hall meeting. People will come together, they can ask questions. So we can't do that anymore in this context. So what can we do? So we've been working to see how can we develop 3D models of the proposed plans for new developments in our cities, but how can we use that model as an interactive tool for our citizens? So can we integrate something like Microsoft Teams into the model so that people can connect with the planners and ask questions? Can we use the model to show people who maybe aren't maybe who don't have a visual impairment? How can we make sure that it's accessible? So we've been using those, I suppose, those projects, those tools, those solutions that we had pre-COVID in just slightly different ways. The context has moved us a little bit in a way that we hadn't anticipated, and we've had some very positive outcomes from that.
All right, and that is quite interesting. But what I would want to know, based on all these initiatives, and this is a question that is posed to both of you, what are some of the best practices you think we can adopt to drive this concept into reality on the African continent? From your end on what has been happening on some of the initiatives you've taken, and I'll go to you, Elba.
So I think that what we have seen that it is always like a best practice is precisely this working in partnerships. So in all the cases, there's nothing that we could have done alone. And I will take, for instance, the example of the Protect and Detect Challenge. So we were working with a global community of makers. So we were working with an organization that was facilitating this contact, but then nothing could be, all the solutions that we received wouldn't have been possible without receiving proposals from makers all around the world. And then nothing would have been happening either if there weren't local communities, universities, maker communities in this local context that were willing to try to replicate those. And also in some cases, like even companies that would like to take those designs and then develop them better and then even commercialize these solutions. So I think that one of the things that I would identify as best practices is also always working in partnerships. And I think that it is one of the, it is basic. We also have like some supporting in some projects related to mobility, where in Zambia concretely, where they are trying to identify where are the areas that are less safe in the city. So this is part also less safe in the city for pedestrians and in terms of road mobility. Sorry, and in that case, you cannot do anything if you do not collaborate with the local government, but also if you do not collaborate with all the users that are using the city and that can be providing some insights afterward. Or even, in another case, we are working also in mobility, and we need to understand what are the uses that people want to give to an e-mobility solution and how are they reacting. So we are doing like surveys and trying to understand the users, analyzing the data from these trips, and also working with the local authorities, with universities that might want to integrate this approach in their campuses. So it's really about talking with different people and beginning to build these relations, listening what are the interests from the different stakeholders, and also trying to see where is the common win-win for everybody. So I think that this could be like the bottom line of all the innovations that we have seen to succeed, that they are really involving all the stakeholders and they are really having this dialogue and trying to adapt. So nothing is already preconceived, but it is really, we want to do an e-mobility project, or we want to understand how we can make the city safer. And it's not just the government saying that, or any stakeholder by its own. It's really a combination of several wheels, knowledges, and activities from all sides.
Yeah, and maybe to build on your recommendations, I would want to hear from Aisling. What do you think are some of the key best practices that we can undertake to counteract these urban challenges in Africa?
So I think one thing that has been very successful for us in Dublin has been what we call our smart district approach. So for us, we have 5 smart districts located all around Dublin. And for us, our smart districts, that's a strategically selected area where we fast track innovation projects. So we have 5 of them all over the city now. They all have a slightly different flavour because they're trying to meet the needs of their specific community. So it's a bespoke programme. Our first district that we launched in 2018 is based in the city centre. And that's a test bed where companies can come and trial and test and develop their products with a really strong focus on future connectivity. So we have a 5G network there. Our second district is in the south of the city, and that's a business district. So a lot of the projects there are around mobility innovations and placemaking innovations, how can create a better community for the businesses who are based there. And we also have our smart DCU, which is our smart city campus. So that's a partnership with a local university where we focus really on what is the cutting edge smart city or that's coming out of the academic world. And we also have a smart town, which is based in the north of Dublin, where we really focus our projects on digital literacy, localized job creation, and community building. We also have our 5th, which is about to launch now in January, and that's going to be Smart D8, which will have a really strong focus on community health and well-being because it's in a district where there's quite a lot of hospitals. So these district approaches for us have been fantastic because we can fast-track projects. There's an understanding that we have a little higher risk profile there and that we're going to transfer the learning out of the district and back in local authority and between the districts. And as Smart Dublin... Sorry, have I frozen? No.
I hear you.
Okay, so the one thing I suppose that's been really important for us in our smart district approach is that what we want in each of the districts is the quadruple helix of open innovation, and that just means that we want to see four different groups represented in governance, implementation, and design. And that is ourselves in terms of the local government actor. We want to see academia, so we want to see representatives from local universities and colleges, and we want to see industry, and we want to see citizens. So in every one of our districts, those 4 groups have to be represented. And I think that's allowed for really interesting projects, and it's allowed for some really cool innovations. So yeah, that's something that I think has been very successful for us and could be applied in many other city contexts.
If I may add here on my side, actually, I think that it is indeed a really interesting approach to work with these like sandboxes or testing areas, because it allows really to see if something is working, and it also gives the different innovators the opportunity to test their solutions, which is also that innovation ecosystems always appreciate a lot, and I have seen it in several other places. And on that, I would like to also mention that, for instance, different ways of innovating, and on this, for instance, I'm going to put as an example tactical urbanism is also a new methodology that does not imply any kind of technology, but that really helps to test new approaches from the city council, or that allows the citizens to propose designs that can be low cost and really test different ways of organizing the cities or using the public spaces that we have seen that can be also really interesting. And I think that now during COVID-19, it is an approach that has been tested in many African cities too, trying to put more bike lanes or pedestrianized areas, and it has been really useful for all the community to test these solutions. So I think that this concept is really interesting.
That's really interesting. I think that we've seen, I'm not sure if you agree, but we've seen certainly in the last kind of 18 months or 2 years, a strong focus now on community engagement. So, you know, there was an era when it was really driven by industry and technology, and obviously there's a huge space for public sector and for academia. But I think finally, there's been a real push for making sure that citizens are with us on this journey and that they're part of it, and that, you know, smart cities isn't just about the hard stuff. It's not just about mobility and smart environment projects. There's also a democratic end to what we do, you know, to make sure that we have citizens' voices are heard. And you know, what goes through my head is, you know, if smart cities are the cities of the future, like let's not make the mistakes of the past. You know, let's make sure that we bring everybody with us, and we can use technology in a really impactful way for that.
Exactly. And I think that, yes, as you said, like the cities of the future, it is not just about technology, because when we think about the cities where we want to live, yes, we want them to be efficient and be very modern, but at the same time, we want them to have gardens, we want to exercise, we want culture, we want that we can find jobs in these cities, we want to be able to move freely in these cities. And I think that indeed it is, but I think that the concept of smart cities has been evolving. And the more we speak with people on this notion, the more people I see that are also incorporating this notion of sustainability, innovation, or resilience in their mentality or in the concept that they are thinking. And besides that, yes, I think that it's also not just about using or not using technology, but also using the technology that is adapted to the local context. So in some countries, you see that there's an interest in really using cutting edge technologies, but maybe the infrastructure is not ready. But then some other simpler and more common technologies such as SMS or chatbots or WhatsApp or Viber or whatever are being more useful to transfer information, to communicate, to book services, etc. So it's about really finding what works for the citizens and what can be used, rather than just focusing on the technological solution.
All right. Thank you for that. And I think that is quite exciting. And right now, I really appreciate your expertise and the input you've given us. Right now, I'd encourage you and also ask you to give us 1 or 2 words of encouragement to our participants who are taking part in the hackathon. And maybe as we get closer, we get to know how best we can tailor all these initiatives to what we are trying to achieve with the hackathon. So I'll go with you, Elba. Could you give us 1 or 2 words that are dedicated towards our participants? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that initiatives like this hackathon are really, I think that it is a great initiative and it's really positive for everyone involved. I think that it gives young entrepreneurs, creatives, coders, makers, citizens in general the opportunity to really take part in finding solutions to the challenges that they are facing every day. And also it's a way of empowering communities and and getting all this creativity that it is inherent in all these cities. And I also think that it is great, this joint cooperation between Europe and Africa. I think that sharing information, knowledge, and also beginning to create these bridges is the best way of finding solutions today, and also to open the door to generate joint solutions in the future. And I think that all participants should be very proud to participate in this event. I think that it is great for these three reasons. One, because all the solutions that can come from this hackathon, then for all the relationships that are being built today between the participants, and that I'm sure that will be bearing fruits in the future, and also for the opportunity that gives to the local communities and to youth and citizens to participate in solving the challenges that they face, because they are the ones that know better which are the challenges that they are facing in their day to day. So I would really like to wish all the participants a very fruitful and fun event, and I will be looking forward to see the solutions that come out of it.
Thank you, Alba. Aisling?
Sure. I mean, just to echo what Alba said in terms of, I think this is a fantastic event. I think that it is incredibly worthwhile that people participate in events like this and be part of the recovery story post-COVID. I suppose this has been a very difficult year, first and foremost, to say to a lot of the participants. You know, I was thinking about it just this morning, and you know, the COVID-19 public health crisis was probably the only truly global experience in my lifetime that I can remember, you know, where the fear and the anxiety that we felt in Ireland was felt in Russia, was felt in Mexico, was felt in Tanzania. You know, it was a really shared global experience. But I hope that that instills in us a sense of global solidarity. You know, I hope that is something that comes out of this crisis, because there are people all over the world, like you, like the participants, who are doing really important work to try and overcome this challenge and overcome this crisis. So yeah, just to say good luck to everybody in your endeavours, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you. And thank you so much. Thank you for your time and expertise. And on behalf of Garage 48 and the rest of organizers, I'll take this opportunity to thank you for your time. And once again, have a good time and a lovely evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.